This is a fictional story, created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, names, places, or events is purely coincidental. My mom stole my wedding money to give to my stepsister so she could buy a house. Okay, so I need you to picture the kind of mom who used to call me just to tell me a random story from the grocery store. Like it mattered, like I mattered. That was my mom for most of my life. We weren't perfect, but we were close in that everyday way that feels unbreakable when you're young. If I had a bad day at work, she'd be the person I texted. If she had a bad day, she'd show up at my tiny apartment with takeout and act like it was a surprise even though we both knew she was rescuing me. She'd sit on my couch, kick off her shoes, and say, "Talk," like she had all the time in the world. Then she started dating this guy. I'm Kala. I'm not even going to pretend I saw the wrecking ball coming. I didn't. At first, it was normal. She was excited. She wore lipstick again. She played music in the kitchen. I was happy for her because after my dad died, she basically went on autopilot for years. And I thought, finally, she's breathing again. The guy was polite in that stiff way, like he'd read a handbook called How to Be Acceptable in Front of Someone Else's Kid. He always smiled too long. He always said my name like he was practicing it. He had a daughter from his first marriage, and she was only a little older than me, which made the whole thing feel less like new step family and more like forced group project. Her vibe was glossy, like she always knew what she was doing, always knew what to say, always knew how to be the center of a room without looking like she was trying. If that sounds bitter, it is. I'm not a saint. At first, I tried. I did the dinners, the awkward small talk, the "so how's work" conversations that felt like chewing cardboard. I tried to be normal about my mom being happy with someone who wasn't my dad. I told myself I was being mature, and for a minute, I thought it would settle into something workable. But then my mom started changing in tiny, quiet ways that didn't make sense until all the tiny things added up. The calls that used to be about her day turned into calls that were really updates about him and his daughter. If I said I had a rough day, she'd go, "Oh, honey, anyway, he's been so stressed at work." If I said I was sick, she'd say, "You know who's been sick? Her. Poor thing." If I told her I was thinking about going back to school or changing jobs, she'd say, "That's nice," and then pivot to what his daughter was doing like it was breaking news. The first holiday season after he moved in, my mom did this thing that felt small to everyone else and gigantic to me. We were opening gifts in the living room, and his daughter got an expensive gift wrapped in glossy paper, the kind of gift you plan and budget for. I got a generic bag with a scented candle and a pair of fuzzy socks, clearly grabbed last minute from a display near the checkout. My mom said, "I thought you'd like cozy stuff," and smiled like she'd nailed it. I stared at the candle and had to swallow that bitter little thought, like, wow, I'm officially the afterthought. I remember sitting in my car after one of those calls, staring at my steering wheel, feeling this weird hot embarrassment like I'd just been dumped and didn't want to admit it. Because how do you even say, "My mom doesn't really want me anymore"? I was an adult with bills and a job and an entire life, and I still felt like a kid getting replaced. By the time I was 19, it was obvious my mom wasn't just dating him. She was orbiting him. And his daughter? She became the sun. I kept trying anyway. Yes, I know. Don't roll your eyes at me. I tried because it was my mom, and because losing my dad already felt like a hole I'd never fill, and I couldn't handle the idea of losing her too. So I smiled through it. I showed up. I played nice. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself once they were settled, she'd remember I existed. Spoiler, she didn't. The thing about my mom's new family was that it came with rules I never agreed to, and somehow I was expected to act grateful for them. The guy didn't like me, not in a we don't vibe way, but in a quiet, strategic way, like my presence was a stain he wanted to lift out of the carpet. He didn't pick fights in front of my mom. He did it in the gaps. He'd sigh when I walked into a room. He'd forget to tell me dinner was ready. He'd make these comments about space, privacy, respect, like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome in my own childhood home. The blow-up happened on a random weeknight. I'd come home late from work, exhausted, and I walked into the kitchen and saw his daughter's mail on the counter. Not just a letter, like a whole stack. She didn't even live there full-time yet, but suddenly she had a key, and suddenly she had packages, and suddenly there were photos of her taped to the fridge like she'd been there forever. I made a comment, a dumb comment, something like, "Wow, she's really moved in fast." And that was all it took. He turned to me with this calm, icy face and said something about how the energy in the house had been tense since I was around, and how his daughter didn't feel comfortable, and how adults make sacrifices for relationships. He didn't yell. That would have been honest. He talked like he was giving a lecture, like he was being reasonable, and I felt my chest start to burn because I could see where it was going. I looked at my mom for backup. I waited for her to do what she used to do, which was defend me even when I was wrong, even when she was annoyed. And she just looked away. She stared at the sink like it had the answers. Then she said quietly, "Maybe it's time you think about your own place." I swear my brain went blank for a second. I heard the words, but they didn't connect. Because what do you mean, my own place? I had always planned to move out, sure, but I thought it would be on my timeline, not because I was inconvenient to her new husband. I said something like, "Are you serious?" And she shrugged like she was asking me to take out the trash. I didn't handle it with grace. I snapped. I cried. I said ugly things I still remember in the shower, like a highlight reel of shame. I accused her of replacing me. I called him controlling. I told his daughter she was acting like a parasite. Yes, I know. Gross. But I was hurt and furious and 19 and suddenly homeless in my own head. My mom's face went hard. He smiled. And within a week, I was gone. I moved into my boyfriend's apartment with my stuff in garbage bags, pretending it was romantic. Pretending it was a fresh start. It wasn't. It was survival. And every time I lay awake at night in a room that didn't feel like mine, I kept thinking, she let this happen. She let me go. She didn't even fight. And the worst part? She called me 2 days later like nothing happened. Just, "Hey, did you get settled?" in that casual voice like she'd lent me a sweater, not kicked me out of her life. Living with my boyfriend was supposed to be the part where I leveled up into adulthood. You know, split rent, build a routine, stop eating cereal for dinner every night. And some of it was good. He was kind in a steady way that made me feel safe, even when I was a mess. He let me cry in his bathroom without making it about him. He didn't say, "Your mom will come around," because he could tell that would make me explode. He just said, "I'm here," and then actually stayed. My boyfriend and I started working extra hours because, surprise, living costs money. I picked up side shifts at a coffee shop near our apartment, and I'd come home smelling like espresso and regret. And my boyfriend would be at the table with his laptop open, doing overtime paperwork. We were tired in that normal, boring way. We were building something. My mom never came over, not once. She'd say, "Oh, it's such a drive," which was hilarious because she would drive farther than that to help his daughter move a lamp. I found out because she told me, proud, like she was collecting points. The moment that snapped something in me happened when I had a minor medical scare. Nothing dramatic, just one of those things where you end up at urgent care because you're dizzy and your body decides to be suspicious for no reason. My boyfriend drove me, stayed the whole time, held my hand while I did paperwork with shaky fingers. I called my mom because I was scared and because I guess part of me still thought she'd show up. She said she couldn't come right away because she was in the middle of something. Later, I found out the something was helping his daughter rearrange furniture in her apartment. Furniture. While I sat under fluorescent lights, trying not to cry, listening to the receptionist say my name wrong, when my mom finally called back hours later, she said, "Are you okay?" in this distracted tone, like she was checking off a task. Then she launched into a story about how hard it is to move a couch. I ended the call early and stared at the wall, feeling this thick, quiet rage that didn't even know where to go. Almost 2 years after I moved in, my boyfriend proposed. Not in some movie way, but in our living room, after we'd spent the day running errands and arguing gently about laundry. He was nervous, which was honestly adorable, and he said, "I want you in my life forever," like he was choosing me on purpose. I said yes, obviously. I cried, obviously. I was happy. And I also felt this dumb, hopeful ache because I thought, maybe now. Maybe my mom will care now. Maybe this will force her to show up. I should have known better. I know. We weren't planning some giant fancy wedding, but we also weren't trying to get married in a parking lot. We wanted something normal. A small venue, decent food, a dress that didn't feel like a costume, a playlist that wouldn't make our friends cringe. We were being practical, which is the funniest thing to say right before your family lights your life on fire. My dad had left money behind. Not millions. Not some secret fortune. Just a set amount he'd saved over time, meant to help me with school and later with a wedding if I ever wanted one. He died when I was younger, and my mom had always kept the paperwork because I was a kid, and she said it was safer that way. It was set up as a designated account for my future, college, a wedding, whatever I needed. And because I was a kid when my dad died, my mom's name was on it like a custodial thing. When I turned 18, I never transferred it. I trusted her. Yes, I hear you. Yes, I was naive. But I was also grieving and I wanted to trust at least one adult in my life. I'd used some of it for college expenses. The rest was supposed to be my cushion for the wedding. So when my boyfriend and I started looking at deposits, I texted my mom and asked for the account details. I expected a normal conversation. I expected mild drama. Maybe her acting offended that I didn't include her enough. I expected her to say something about how weddings are stressful. I didn't expect what I got. She replied like it was no big deal. Just, "Oh, honey, I used that money. We needed it." I remember reading it twice, then 3 times, like the letters would rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. My hands went cold. I was sitting on my couch, and my boyfriend was in the kitchen washing dishes, humming to himself, and I just stared at my phone like it had slapped me. I texted back, "Used it for what?" And she said, "For the down payment. It was a great opportunity for her. You'll understand when you're older." Her, as in his daughter, as in the girl who smirked at me like I was a stain, as in the girl my mom had been chasing like a lost friend. I stood up so fast I got dizzy, and I walked into the kitchen and my boyfriend looked at my face and immediately shut the water off because he could tell something was wrong. I told him. I couldn't even keep my voice steady. I kept saying, she used it, like a broken toy. He asked how much. I told him in words because apparently that's my life now, and he went pale. We called my mom. She answered like she was expecting us, and she sounded irritated like we were interrupting her evening. I asked her, "Why would you take money my dad left for me?" And she said, "I didn't take it, I used it. It's still in the family." She actually said that. Like I should be grateful my dead dad's money went to buy someone else a house. I started yelling. My boyfriend told me to breathe. My mom told me I was being dramatic. Then she did that thing where she tries to flip the emotional script and make herself the victim. She said she was under pressure. She said her husband was worried about his daughter's future. She said I was selfish. She said, "You have a fiancé. You're fine." And then she hit me with, "Your father would have wanted us to help her." That's when I started shaking. Like, full body shaking. Because my dad wasn't here to say anything, and she was using him like a prop. I hung up. I threw my phone on the couch. I cried so hard my face hurt. My boyfriend sat next to me and wrapped his arms around me, and I kept thinking, my mom stole from me. My mom, the woman who used to bring me soup when I was sick. And suddenly the wedding wasn't just a wedding. It was proof of whether I mattered at all. A few days after the phone call from hell, my mom invited me to a little gathering. She didn't say housewarming, but that's what it was. She framed it like a peace offering, like, "Come over, we'll talk. I'm sure we can figure something out." I should have said no. I should have stayed home and eaten ice cream and blocked her number for a while. But part of me wanted to see it. Part of me wanted proof of what she'd done, because my brain kept trying to deny it. It's this fun little thing trauma does where it goes. Maybe you misunderstood, maybe you're being dramatic. Spoiler, I wasn't. So my boyfriend and I drove there. The house was nice. And here's the part that still makes my stomach twist. He bought that house in his own name, then told everyone it was for his daughter, even though it was really where he and my mom lived. The down payment came from my dad's money that was supposed to be mine. Not a mansion, not some ridiculous celebrity thing, but nice in a way that made my stomach twist because I could picture exactly what my dad's money had gone into. New paint, fresh flooring, a kitchen that didn't have that sad old apartment smell. There were balloons, there were snacks on trays, there were people smiling and saying a congratulations, like they weren't standing inside a lie. His daughter was glowing. She walked around like a tour guide, showing people every room, every closet, every corner, like she'd built it with her own hands. She kept throwing these looks at my mom, like she was waiting for applause, and my mom kept giving it, like a trained seal. When they introduced me to people, they said my first name like I was a cousin who'd stopped by, not the daughter who'd been pushed out. My mom pulled me aside and said, "Isn't it great? She finally has something stable." I stared at her and said, "With my money." And she got that tight smile again and said, "It's not just yours. It was meant for family." Then she offered her solution. She said, "We can do something simple for your wedding. You can use the backyard at the house. We'll put up lights. It'll be cute." Like she was offering me a discount party package. Like it was generous. Like I should clap. I said, "So you take the money and then you offer me your backyard as a consolation prize?" And my mom's husband swooped in like he'd been waiting. He said something about adulthood and expectations and how kids these days want everything. He actually called me a kid. I'm standing there with a job and rent and a ring on my finger, and he calls me a kid. His daughter drifted closer, pretending to listen innocently. And then she said, "Honestly, a backyard wedding is really charming. It'll look great in pictures." She said it like she was doing me a favor, like she was educating me on trends. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did that thing where you laugh because you're about to cry. I said, "You're so generous," in the most sarcastic tone I've ever used in my life, and my mom shot me a look like I'd slapped her. I felt my boyfriend's hand on my back, steadying me, because he could tell I was about to go nuclear. We left early. In the car, I stared out the window and watched houses blur by, thinking about how unfair it felt that my dad was gone and she was still here, spending his last gift like it was loose change. I cried quietly, because if I cried loud, I knew I'd start screaming, and I didn't trust myself not to drive straight back and ruin the whole party. That night, my mom texted me a smiley face, like we'd had a cute little disagreement. I threw my phone on the bed and said out loud, "I hate her," and then immediately felt sick because I never thought I'd say that about my mother. But I did, and I meant it. After that, my mom went into full performance mode. She started calling more, leaving these sugary voice messages like we were close again, like we were in some sitcom where the misunderstanding gets wrapped up in 20 minutes. She'd say things like, "I miss you," and "We need to get you excited again." And every time I listened, I felt this mix of rage and embarrassment, because it sounded like she missed the version of me that didn't ask questions. Then she invited me back over, saying she wanted to talk woman to woman, which made my eye twitch because she was literally my mother. But okay. My boyfriend came with me because he didn't trust them, and honestly, neither did I. We walked into the house, and it was like nothing had happened. My mom was smiling, his daughter was lounging on the couch, and my mom's husband was acting like he was doing us a favor by letting us breathe the same air. My mom sat me down and said, "I've been thinking, we need to make your wedding special, even if it's smaller." And for a second, my stupid heart jumped because I thought maybe she's going to offer something real. Maybe she's going to apologize. Maybe she's going to say she messed up. "Nope," she said. "What if she is your main bridesmaid? It would show everyone how blended and healthy our family is." I stared at her. I actually checked my mom's face for signs she was joking. She wasn't. His daughter did this little smile like she'd just won something. She said, "I'd love to help you. I have such good taste and I can plan everything." She said it like she was announcing she'd rescue me from my own incompetence. That's when something in me snapped. Not like a dramatic movie snap. More like, I felt all the years of being ignored pile up in my chest at the same time, and there was nowhere to put it. I said, "You stole from me?" I said it loud. I said it in front of all of them, because I was done pretending. My mom tried to hush me. She said, "Don't say it like that." And I said, "How should I say it? You took money my dad left for me, and you used it to buy her a house, and now you want her to be my bridesmaid like we're all besties? Are you out of your mind?" His daughter's face went red. She stood up and said, "It wasn't stealing, it was an investment." And I laughed, this sharp, ugly sound, and said, "You're not an investment, you're my mom's obsession." My mom's husband stepped in. He got that calm lecture voice again and said I was disrespectful, and I said, "You kicked me out." He said it was for the good of the household, and I said, "No, it was for the good of your ego." Then my mom started crying, which felt almost insulting, because she cried like she'd been wounded, like she was the victim, and I was standing there feeling like my insides were on fire. My boyfriend tried to pull me back, whispering, "Let's go." But I wasn't done. I told my mom she'd abandoned me. I told her she'd turned into someone I didn't recognize. I told her I didn't care if she was embarrassed. And then his daughter said, "If you're going to act like this, you can leave." Like it was her house, her rules, her authority. I looked at my mom again. I waited. I waited for her to say, "No, this is my daughter." I waited for anything. She didn't. She just stared at me with tears on her cheeks and said, "Please, stop." So I stopped. I grabbed my purse, walked out, and I heard his daughter lock the door behind me. I heard it. That little click, like I was an intruder. In the car, I didn't cry right away. I just sat there shaking, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the street. Then I started sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. My boyfriend kept saying, "It's not your fault." And I kept thinking, it kind of is, because I let her do this for years. I kept hoping she'd choose me, and every time she didn't, I acted surprised. By the time we got home, I was exhausted in my bones. I told myself I was done. I told myself I wasn't going to chase her anymore. And then my mom called me the next day like nothing happened. Again. That's when I realized this wasn't going to end with a heartfelt conversation. This was going to end with something breaking. I went quiet for a while after that. No calls, no texts, no, maybe we can talk. Just silence. It wasn't some noble boundary-setting moment. It was me protecting the last thread of sanity I had left. I muted my mom's contact. I stopped checking the family group chat I'd barely been included in anyway. I focused on work, on wedding planning with the money we actually had, on basic survival. A week into my silence, my boyfriend came home with this weird expression, like he'd stepped in something gross. He set his bag down, sat next to me, and said, "I got something in the mail." Not email. Actual mail. Which already made me nervous. Because who sends drama through the mail unless they want it to feel official? He pulled out an envelope with photos inside. Printed photos. And when I tell you my stomach dropped, I mean it. Because the pictures showed a woman who looked like me, kissing a guy who wasn't my boyfriend. It was in a parking lot. It was blurry, but clear enough to make your brain do that quick panic math. There were multiple angles. There was even a shot that looked like a candid, like someone had been watching. I went cold. I stared at them, and for half a second I couldn't even speak, because my brain was like, how is this possible? I hadn't been anywhere near that. I hadn't kissed anyone. I barely had the energy to breathe most days. Then my boyfriend said, "I don't believe it." Just like that. No yelling, no accusations, no dramatic exit. He said it like he was stating a fact. And the relief hit me so hard I had to put the photos down and hold my head, because I thought I was going to throw up. We sat there and went through them slowly. The more I looked, the more it felt wrong. The lighting was off. The face angle was weird. The hair was close, but not mine. It was like someone had taken a few similar features and tried to build a fake version of me, like a bad imitation. My boyfriend pointed out tiny details I wouldn't have noticed because I was panicking. He said, "Your mole isn't there." And I almost cried again because, God, he knew my face that well. We knew who did it. We didn't even have to say it. Later, I got confirmation in the dumbest, most ordinary way. The envelope had a local postmark, and inside there was a little order slip from a photo print counter. The kind you get when you pick up pictures, with the pickup notes scribbled in the same rounded handwriting I'd seen on her birthday cards. It wasn't some dramatic gotcha. It was just enough to make my skin go cold, because it meant she wasn't just being cruel in public. She was planning it. And this is where the photos stopped being just a scare tactic in my head, because I kept that envelope. I added it to a folder with every screenshot and every message. When I talked to the lawyer about the money my dad left, I didn't lead with rage. I led with a timeline. I showed the envelope and said, "This is what they do when I don't play along." It didn't turn into some huge courtroom moment, but it helped explain why I was done trying to be reasonable with people who weren't. My mom's husband's daughter had always hated me, but now she was going after my relationship because that was the one thing I had that felt stable. She wanted me isolated. She wanted me desperate. And my mom? My mom was either helping or pretending not to know, which honestly felt like the same thing at that point. I wanted to march over there and throw the photos in their faces. I wanted to scream at my mom until she finally heard me. But my boyfriend said something that made me pause. He said, "They're escalating. We need to be smart." Smart. Me. Ha. We talked about what else they could do. Work, friends, the wedding itself. If they were willing to send fake evidence through the mail, what were they willing to say online on some social media app where people believe anything with a blurry picture? I hated that I even had to think about it. I hated that my own family felt like a threat. That night, I sat in bed and scrolled through old messages from my mom, like I was looking for the exact moment she stopped being my mom. I found myself zooming in on words, rereading them, trying to understand her logic. I spiraled. I'm not proud. I barely slept. By morning, I knew one thing. Ignoring them wasn't going to protect me. Silence was just giving them room. So I did something reckless. I decided to go back in. I hate admitting this, but I put on a whole performance. Like I rehearsed it. In my car, in the mirror, in my head. I practiced sounding tired instead of furious, like I'd finally calmed down. I knew if I walked in there with fire, they'd shut me out. If I walked in there acting defeated, they'd open the door. People like that love a humbled version of you. So I went over alone. My boyfriend offered to come, but I told him I needed to do this part by myself. Also, I knew if he came, I'd act brave to impress him and ruin the plan. I'm self-aware, at least. My mom opened the door and her face did that quick flicker between guilt and relief. She hugged me like she'd missed me, which made my skin crawl, and she said, "I'm so glad you're here." Like she hadn't let a door lock click behind me a week earlier. His daughter was there too, lounging like she owned the air. Her boyfriend was there, a guy I'd seen maybe twice before at family dinners. He was quiet, the kind of guy who faded into the background, always on his phone or nodding politely while she dominated every conversation. I didn't know him well, but I knew his name from the family group chat where my mom would occasionally mention him. He looked at me like he'd heard stories about me. Probably had. I did my fake apology. I said I'd been stressed. I said wedding planning was getting to me. I said I didn't want us to fight anymore. My mom ate it up. She started tearing up again, and she said, "See, I knew you'd come around." Which honestly was a wild thing to say when the issue was her stealing my money. But okay. My phone started doing that low battery panic thing when my mom left her phone on the kitchen counter to refill drinks. She'd been using it all day, and in the rush, she forgot to lock it. Everyone was distracted in the living room. I grabbed it, went straight to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the tub like I was about to faint. I had maybe a minute before she noticed. That's the thing. She thinks she's the main character. She thinks nobody will ever question her. The screen lit up and there was a notification banner. A message. A name saved with a heart emoji. Not her husband. Not anyone in our family. Just a nickname. Flirty and stupid. My brain went quiet. Like, blank. Then it went loud. I tapped it before I could talk myself out of it. I know it was wrong. I know. But I also knew I was staring at something I wasn't supposed to see. And part of me felt like the universe was handing me a weapon after years of being slapped. It was a conversation between my mom and his daughter's boyfriend, the quiet guy, the one sitting 10 feet away from me on the couch, looking at his hands. The messages weren't subtle. They weren't, "Hey, how's your day?" They were intimate. They were about missing each other, about sneaking time, about kisses, about how risky it was. There were lines that made my stomach turn because they sounded like something a teenager would write, except it was my mother. There were plans. There were jokes about his daughter being clueless. There were even messages where my mom said she wished she'd met him first. I felt like I'd been punched. My hands started shaking. I took screenshots. I took as many as I could without thinking. I sent them to myself. I deleted the sent evidence. I wiped my tracks like I'd watched a spy movie, which would be funny if I wasn't about to throw up. Then my mom called my name from the kitchen. "Do you want coffee?" Like we were having a cute mom-daughter moment. I swallowed, locked the phone, handed it back, and said, "Sure," in this calm voice that didn't sound like mine. I sat there sipping coffee, nodding through small talk, while my brain screamed. I watched his daughter lean into her boyfriend and laugh, completely unaware. I watched my mom glance at her husband and act affectionate like she wasn't cheating with the girl's boyfriend. I watched a whole fake family smile in a living room bought with my dad's money, and I felt this cold clarity settle in my chest. They didn't just hurt me, they were rotten, all the way through. When I left, I got in my car and sat there for a long time with my hands on the steering wheel, trying to decide what kind of person I was about to become. I didn't go straight to revenge. I'm not that organized. My first reaction was more like shock, then disgust. Then this weird grief, like I'd just found out my mom wasn't who I thought she was and I had to mourn a person who was technically still alive. I told my boyfriend everything that night, and he sat there with his jaw clenched, staring at the screenshots on my phone like they were radioactive. He asked if I wanted to send them to the daughter immediately, and I said, not yet. Because if I did it privately, my mom would spin it. She'd cry, she'd blame me, she'd say I misunderstood, she'd make me the villain again. I knew it in my bones. Also, and I hate admitting this, a part of me wanted them to feel it. The humiliation, the sudden ground dropping out. The way I'd felt when my mom told me she'd used my dad's money like it was spare change. A few days later, his daughter texted me. Not my mom. His daughter. She wrote, "Hey, I'm doing a big birthday thing at the house. Mom said you're good at organizing. Can you help?" The audacity almost made me laugh. She wanted me to help plan a party in a house partly bought with money stolen from me for her birthday, while my mom was sneaking around with her boyfriend. It was like the universe was daring me to snap. I said yes. I said, of course. Because sometimes the best revenge is letting people think you're harmless. For the next few weeks, I became her unpaid assistant. I drove across town to pick up decorations. I ran errands after work. I listened to her talk about herself like she was the most interesting person alive. She treated me like a servant and a sibling at the same time, which is a special kind of gross. She'd say, "You're lucky you get to be involved." And I'd smile and swallow my rage like it was medicine. I'd go home and vent to my boyfriend until my throat hurt, and he'd say, "You don't have to do this." And I'd say, "I know. I'm choosing to." My mom was suddenly everywhere again, but not for me, for the party. She was obsessed with making it perfect. She kept talking about how the house felt like a fresh start for their family, which made my eye twitch because, again, it was my dad's money under those fresh floors. She also mentioned, casually, that using my dad's money for the down payment didn't magically erase the monthly bill, and she'd been covering part of the payments for now. Like it was nothing. That made my stomach twist too, because she'd taken my money and she was still paying for it. Like she couldn't stop feeding the obsession. One night during planning, my mom showed me a digital slideshow she'd made for the birthday, full of photos of his daughter through the years. Baby pictures, school pictures, vacation shots. It was sweet in a normal way, and that's what made it so sick. Because my mom had put hours into making something sentimental for a girl she'd known a few years, and she'd barely shown up for me since I moved out. I nodded and said, "It's cute." And inside, a plan started forming so clearly it scared me. If my mom wanted a slideshow, she'd get one. Just not the one she made. I didn't tell my boyfriend at first. I sat with the idea like it was a live wire. I knew it would blow up everything. I knew it would turn into a mess. I also knew nothing else had ever made my mom face consequences. She'd never apologized for kicking me out. She'd never apologized for the money. She'd never even admitted she'd hurt me. She just kept moving forward, building a new life on top of my pain. So, yeah, I decided if she wanted a perfect family moment, I was going to give her the truth instead. And I swear, the moment I decided that, my hands stopped shaking for the first time in weeks. It was like my body finally picked a direction. The problem with plans is that real life doesn't care about your dramatic arc. My mom guarded that slideshow like it was a national secret. She kept the laptop with her, took it from room to room, acted like if she left it alone for 5 minutes, I'd infect it with negativity. Every time I tried to get near it, she'd suddenly appear and say, "Oh, I'll handle that," in this bright voice that sounded friendly but felt like a warning. I started getting paranoid. I'd be folding napkins at the dining table, and I'd hear her move the laptop to another room, and my heart would race like I was doing something illegal. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and stare at my ceiling, thinking about file folders and timing and how I could pull it off without being caught. Yes, I know how insane that sounds. Welcome to my life. I considered just sending the screenshots to his daughter directly. It would have been simpler, but simple didn't feel right. Simple felt like something they could brush off, something my mom could spin. I could already hear it. She's lying, she's jealous, she's unstable. If I did it privately, it would turn into a he said, she said, and I'd be the villain again. A public reveal meant witnesses. It meant my mom couldn't rewrite reality in her favorite dramatic tone. It meant she'd have to sit in the mess she created. But to do that, I needed access to the slideshow file. I needed a window of time long enough to swap it. And my mom wasn't giving me a window. The day before the party, I went over to drop off stuff, and my mom's husband was there, hovering, watching me like I was going to steal the silverware. His daughter was running around making lists and barking orders like she was planning a wedding, not a birthday. My mom sat with the laptop on her lap, clicking through slides, smiling, and every time I looked at it, my mouth went dry. At one point, my mom got up to take a call and she took the laptop with her. I almost laughed. Like, "Lady, what do you think I'm going to do? Swap your slideshow in 5 seconds with my mind?" Honestly, I wish. I left that day feeling like my plan was doomed. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. My boyfriend asked what was wrong, and I finally told him, because I couldn't carry it alone anymore. I showed him the screenshots again, then explained what I wanted to do. He listened, quiet, and then he said, "If you do this, there's no going back." Which wasn't helpful, because I already knew that. But then he added, "I'll support you. I just don't want you to get hurt more." That made me cry, because I realized part of me was still that 19-year-old hoping my mom would choose me. And this plan, it was me setting that hope on fire on purpose. That night, I wrote a new slideshow on my own laptop, using the screenshots, adding a few captions so there was no misunderstanding, making it clear who the messages were between. I saved it under a boring file name so it wouldn't stand out. I stared at it on my screen and felt my stomach flip. I was terrified. I was furious. I was weirdly calm. It was all of it at once. I fell asleep thinking, if I can't get to her laptop, I'm going to have to get creative. Party day arrived like a storm. The house was packed with noise and cheap perfume and the smell of food sitting out too long. People showed up with gifts and fake smiles and those loud, syrupy voices people use when they're trying to look supportive in public. His daughter was in a dress that screamed, "Look at me," and she floated through the rooms like she was hosting a talk show, hugging people and saying, "I'm so blessed," like she'd personally earned every square foot of that house. My mom was glowing too. She kept touching his daughter's arm, laughing too hard, acting like she was the proudest parent alive. And her husband looked tense in that way men get when they're trying to play the happy husband role, but they know the vibes are off. I stayed near the edges, helping with food, pretending I was just the helpful almost sister, smiling when people spoke to me, feeling like a bomb with a cute outfit on. My boyfriend stayed close, but not too close because we didn't want to look like a team. He kept checking my face and I kept giving him these tiny looks that said, "Not yet." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I kept touching my pocket, making sure my flash drive was still there. Yes, I used a flash drive. I felt like I was in the early 2000s. Whatever. It worked. The laptop was in the living room, connected to a projector. My mom had put it there like a centerpiece. She was guarding it, of course. Every time someone walked near it, she hovered. I started thinking, she knows. She has to know. But she didn't. She was just controlling. I waited, and waited, and waited. I helped carry plates. I refilled drinks. I made small talk with a woman who kept calling me sweetie like she knew me. I laughed at jokes I didn't find funny. I watched my mom take selfies with his daughter, their cheeks pressed together, and I felt this hot rage flare and then cool again, like a wave. Then finally, the universe gave me a crack. His daughter's boyfriend, the quiet one, asked my mom to talk in the hallway. I watched them. I watched his hands twist, like he was nervous. My mom followed him with this practiced casualness, like it was normal. Her husband went outside to smoke with a couple of guests. His daughter ran to the kitchen because someone said the cake needed cutting. For maybe 60 seconds, the laptop was alone. The laptop was open because my mom had been messing with the projector connection all afternoon. I'd watched her earlier and memorized the file name, Birthday Final Version 3. I also knew the exact file name because I'd seen it during planning, which is honestly the only reason I didn't freeze and ruin the whole thing. I moved like I was on autopilot. I didn't think. If I thought, I would have frozen. I walked to the laptop, smiled at the closest guest like I belonged there, slid the flash drive in, and clicked through folders with my fingers shaking so badly I nearly missed the file. I woke the screen, plugged in my thumb drive, opened the folder, and dropped my file right on top of hers. When it asked if I wanted to replace it, I clicked yes. I yanked the drive out and stepped back. I ejected the flash drive, shoved it back in my pocket, and stepped away just as my mom came back into the room. She didn't look at me. She didn't notice. She walked straight to the laptop and patted it like a pet. My knees went weak. I went to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub with my hands over my mouth, breathing like I'd just run a marathon. I stared at my own reflection and thought, "What are you doing, Calla?" I came out in time for the speech. My mom clinked a glass with a spoon and people quieted down. She started talking about how proud she was, how grateful she was, how family is everything. Hearing her say family made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. Then she said, "And now we have a little slideshow of memories." The lights dimmed. The projector turned on. The first slide was a screenshot of my mom's messages to the boyfriend, with his name right there in the thread. No confusion. The room went dead silent in a way that felt unnatural, like even the air stopped. Then someone made a little noise, like a confused laugh. Then the next slide came up. Another message. Another. A line about meeting up. A line about missing his mouth. A line about how his daughter would never know. I watched his daughter's face change. She went from confusion to disbelief to the slow, dawning horror, like her brain was trying to protect her and failing. The boyfriend went pale. My mom's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked around like she was waiting for someone to explain it to her, like it couldn't be her life on the wall. People started whispering. Someone said, "Is that real?" Someone else said, "Oh my God." And then his daughter turned to her boyfriend and screamed his name so loud it made my skin prickle. And that was it. The moment the whole house split open. It turned into chaos so fast I almost couldn't track it. His daughter started yelling at her boyfriend, and he kept stuttering like a broken machine saying, "It's not what it looks like," which was honestly impressive because it looked exactly like what it was. She grabbed his shirt and demanded his phone. And he refused, and that refusal was like pouring gasoline on her. Then she swung. It wasn't some dramatic movie punch. It was a sharp slap, loud enough that several people gasped at once, and her boyfriend stumbled back, eyes wide, hand on his cheek like he couldn't believe he'd just been hit in public. My mom rushed forward, hands out, saying, "Stop! Stop!" in this high, panicked voice, and his daughter turned on her like a wild animal that finally smelled the real predator. She screamed at my mom, calling her disgusting, calling her names I won't even repeat because they were brutal, and my mom tried to cry her way out of it like she always does. She kept saying, "I didn't mean for it to happen, like cheating is an accident you trip into." She kept trying to touch his daughter's arm, like they were still bonded, and his daughter shoved her away so hard my mom stumbled. Her husband finally came back inside, smelling like smoke, eyes already annoyed, and he looked at the projector screen and then at my mom and then at the boyfriend, and you could see it click. He didn't ask questions. He didn't do the slow denial thing. His face went so cold it scared me. He walked straight up to my mom and said, "Get out." Just 2 words. Flat. Dead. My mom started babbling. "Please let me explain." And he said louder, "Get out of my house." People were recording on their phones at this point, holding them up like they were watching a show, which made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream at them to stop, even though part of me knew I'd planned for a public moment. I didn't plan for the way it would turn into content for strangers. His daughter was sobbing now, loud, messy sobs, and she kept yelling at her boyfriend, and my mom's husband kept yelling at my mom, and the whole room felt like a bunch of overlapping sirens. Someone knocked over a drink. Someone stepped on the gift bags. The projector kept rolling through message after message because nobody had the presence of mind to turn it off. Every few seconds, another screenshot popped up, and the whispers got louder. My boyfriend found me in the corner and put his arm around me, grounding me. He whispered, "Are you okay?" And I almost laughed because what does okay even mean in that moment? I felt like I was floating above my own body watching it happen, like my brain had detached to survive it. My mom's husband grabbed the laptop and slammed it shut, finally ending the slideshow. But the damage was done. His daughter screamed, "How long?" at her boyfriend. He didn't answer. My mom started pleading, "I love you," to her husband, and he said, "No, you love attention." That line landed like a slap, too. People made those shocked noises again. At some point, someone called the police. Because in this country, people call the police when there's a domestic dispute and they don't know what else to do. 2 officers showed up, calm and bored, like they'd seen this exact scene 1,000 times, and they told everyone to step back, lower voices, stop pushing. My mom tried to explain through tears, and one officer looked at her like, "Lady, I don't get paid enough for your soap opera." They didn't arrest anyone. Nobody was bleeding. It was just chaos. The officers basically told my mom to leave and told the boyfriend to leave and told the guests to stop filming. His daughter sat on the stairs, shaking, mascara streaked, holding her knees like a child, while my mom stood in the doorway, stunned, looking around for someone to save her. She looked at me at one point. Our eyes met, and I swear, in that second, she knew. She didn't say my name, she just stared, and I stared back. Then she walked out into the night like the ground had finally vanished under her feet. Later, I pieced together what happened to him from mutual friends and those little social media whispers people love to pass around. His daughter, the birthday girl whose party turned into a public disaster, didn't waste time. She blocked him on everything, tossed his stuff out onto the lawn like it was trash day, and made sure everyone in their circle knew exactly what he'd done. He tried posting something vague on a social media app about misunderstandings and complicated situations, like that was going to magically blur the screenshots. It didn't. People tore him apart in the comments. Within a week, he'd deleted his accounts. And then I heard, through a coworker who knew someone at his job, that he'd asked for a transfer to another state. Apparently, he didn't even come back for the rest of his stuff, like he wanted to erase his own footprints. Whether he got the transfer or he just quit and ran, I don't know. He vanished, and good riddance. I went home afterward and threw up in my sink. That's the part nobody talks about when they fantasize about revenge. The body doesn't care if you were right. It just knows you survived something intense and now it's purging. The next morning, my phone was a disaster. My mom had left voice messages all night. At first, they were angry, like she wanted to scare me back into obedience. "We need to talk right now." Then they shifted into pleading. "Please, I don't have anywhere to go." Then they got weirdly sentimental. "I'm still your mother." Like biology is a coupon you can redeem after you betray someone. I listened to them in my kitchen while my coffee went cold. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty either. I felt tired, like someone had wrung me out. My mom's husband filed for divorce fast. I know that because my mom told me, between sobs, like it was my responsibility to comfort her. Apparently the house had been in his name from the start. His idea? His control move, because he said it was simpler and he didn't want the mortgage tied to anyone else. My mom went along with it because she trusted him, or because she liked having someone else make decisions so she didn't have to. So when everything blew up, she didn't just lose her marriage. She lost the house she'd been treating like her trophy. She was suddenly living in a cheap room and sending me pictures of the tiny space like I was supposed to panic. His daughter cut her off immediately. She sent a message to my mom that was basically, "You ruined my life." And then she blocked her. She also apparently broke up with her boyfriend, obviously, and I heard through the grapevine that she'd thrown his stuff into the driveway and told him to pick it up like trash. Which, honestly, fair. My mom tried to crawl back to me like I was her backup plan. She texted about how lonely she was. She said she'd made a mistake. She said she'd lost herself. She said she didn't deserve this. She said she didn't mean to hurt me. She never once said, "I stole your father's money." Not in those words. Not directly. She kept dancing around it like if she didn't name it, it wasn't real. Meanwhile, the wedding was still in limbo, because deposits were due and we were short. My boyfriend and I sat at our table and did the math again and again, like math might magically change. We argued a little, not because we blamed each other, but because stress makes you snippy and we're human. He suggested postponing. I said I didn't want to give my mom that much power over my timeline. Then I cried because I realized she already had. I talked to a lawyer. Not some fancy one, just someone local who deals with family financial messes. I explained in plain language that my dad left me money, my mom had access, and she used it without my consent. The lawyer asked if I had paperwork, and I did, because my dad had been organized and my mom had kept some records, ironically. We started the process. It wasn't dramatic. It was forms, phone calls, waiting. It was boring, which is what real revenge looks like most of the time. At work, a coworker asked me if I'd seen the crazy party video, and my stomach dropped because I knew exactly what it was. People did that fake concern thing while fishing for details, and I kept smiling like I wasn't dying inside. My boss just asked if I was okay, and then everyone went right back to passing it around in group chats like it was entertainment. My boyfriend kept telling me, "Let them talk." But you know that feeling when your personal pain becomes public and you can't control the narrative anymore? It's like being naked in a crowded room and everyone is pretending not to stare while still staring. My mom sent one last message that week that said, "Was it you?" Just that. No emoji, no softness. She knew, and she was asking like she deserved honesty. I stared at that message for a long time, and then I did something that felt both petty and necessary. I didn't answer. We ended up taking help from my boyfriend's parents, which was one of the hardest parts for me, pride-wise. I grew up with my mom drilling into me that we don't ask people for money. We don't owe anyone. We handle our own problems. And then she turned around and used my dad's money like it was hers to spend. So asking someone else for help felt humiliating and unfair, like I was being punished twice. His parents offered it gently. They didn't make it weird. His mom just said, "We want you two to start your marriage without this shadow." His dad said we could pay them back slowly, whatever worked. No pressure. I nodded and said thank you and tried not to cry because I didn't want to be the shaky mess girl in front of them. We postponed the wedding a few months, just enough time to breathe and replan in a way that didn't feel like scrambling. I stayed at my job, picked up extra shifts when I could, and my boyfriend did the same. We were basically living in a loop of work. Sleep, eat, repeat. Wedding planning became this background hum instead of the center of our lives, and honestly, that was better for my mental health. When the wedding day came, it was nice. Simple. Normal. We got married in a small venue with warm lights and folding chairs that didn't match. And I loved it anyway because it was ours. I wore a dress that made me feel like myself, not a character. My boyfriend cried when he saw me, which made me laugh and cry at the same time. Our friends danced too hard. Someone spilled a drink. It felt real. And then there was the empty space. Not a physical chair, but the absence of my mom. I hadn't invited her. I couldn't. I couldn't have her sitting there pretending she was proud while my dad's money paid for her betrayal. But even though I made that choice, it still hurt. I kept catching myself looking toward the entrance, like she might show up anyway. Like she might finally prove she was still my mom. She didn't. There was a moment during the ceremony where I glanced at my side of the room and saw a few supportive faces, but not the face I used to imagine there. I felt this weird, sharp grief, not just for my dad, but for the version of my mom I used to have. I swallowed it and kept smiling, because you can't fall apart in the middle of your vows. Actually, you can, but I didn't want to. Afterward, we took a short honeymoon, just a few days away where nobody knew the drama. I remember sitting by a pool and feeling my shoulders finally drop. My boyfriend said, "We made it," and I said, "We did," and I meant it. The legal process took over a year and a half. My lawyer helped me pull bank statements and follow the trail. My dad's account, then the transfers, then the down payment. My mom tried to argue she could use it because her name was on the account, but my dad's will said it was for me. The judge ordered monthly repayment. It was paperwork, delays, and a final decision. It wasn't poetic justice. It wasn't some movie moment where she collapses and apologizes. It was a judge in a plain room saying this money wasn't hers. When the first payment hit my account, I stared at it like it was fake. Then I forwarded it straight to my boyfriend's parents. They told me to keep it for us, but I couldn't. I needed to pay them back. I needed to feel like I wasn't living on someone else's kindness forever. So I kept working extra. I kept my head down. I kept moving. And my mom kept sending messages into the void like she couldn't stand that I wasn't responding. Some nights I'd lie in bed and wonder if I'd gone too far. Then I'd remember her shrugging at the sink when they told me to leave, her casual text about using my money, her smiley face after offering me her backyard, and the guilt would burn off like smoke. Over the months that followed, the fallout kept unfolding, even when I wanted it to be over. My mom's divorce became official, and from what I heard, it wasn't gentle. Her husband was furious and cold, and he fought her on everything. She had to move again, from the cheap extended stay place to a smaller apartment, and she kept cycling through short-term jobs like she couldn't keep her life stable long enough to hold anything. People who used to praise her started avoiding her. The social circle she'd been so desperate to impress suddenly treated her like gossip they didn't want in their homes. Without my mom contributing to the mortgage anymore, he couldn't afford to keep the house on his own. And once the divorce turned ugly, he put the house on the market. Watching the listing go up felt strange, because that place had been the loudest symbol of what they did to me. It was like watching a fire burn out after it's already destroyed your stuff. My relationship with my mom's side of the family basically evaporated. Some relatives blamed me for humiliating her. Others said they understood but still wished I'd handled it privately. Nobody asked what it was like to be pushed out at 19 or to have my dad's last gift taken from me. People love the idea of family loyalty until it costs them comfort. My boyfriend's parents, on the other hand, kept showing up. They checked on me. They invited us over for dinner. They treated me like I belonged, which made me feel both grateful and weirdly sad, because it highlighted how little my own mother had done. By the time I finished paying them back, I cried in my car again, because apparently that's how I process milestones now. I sent his parents a message saying, "We're square," and his mom replied with, "We were never keeping score." That made me cry harder. Pathetic? Maybe. Honest? Yes. My mom kept trying. She'd send messages on holidays. She'd say she missed me. She'd say she'd changed. She'd say she wanted to meet for coffee. She'd leave voicemails where her voice sounded small. And for a second, my chest would tighten, and I'd picture the mom who used to show up with soup. Then I'd remember the other mom, the one who smiled while she replaced me. One night, 11 months after the party, she left a long voice message. She didn't cry much. She sounded tired. She said she knew it was me who swapped the slideshow. She said she didn't blame me, which felt like the most backwards thing she could say, because it made it sound like she was forgiving me. Then she asked straight up, "Did you do it? I need to hear it from you." I listened to that message 3 times. I sat on my couch with my phone in my hand and my husband in the kitchen, and I felt like 2 versions of myself were fighting. The younger one wanted to answer. The younger one wanted a conversation, even if it was angry. The older one, the one I'd become through all this, knew that answering would reopen the door. So I didn't. I deleted the message after I listened, not because I wanted to erase proof, but because I didn't want her voice living in my pocket. I blocked her number for real this time, not as punishment, as protection. And here's the part that might surprise you. I don't feel victorious. I don't feel like some hero who taught her a lesson. I feel like someone who finally stopped setting herself on fire to keep her mother warm. I feel like someone who learned, painfully, that love without boundaries is just slow self-destruction. Sometimes, late at night, I still miss her. Or I miss who she used to be. Or I miss the idea of her. But missing someone doesn't mean you have to let them back in. So that's where it ended. Not with forgiveness. Not with a reunion. Just with a locked door. A quiet apartment. A marriage I fought for. And the kind of peace you earn when you finally accept that some people will never love you the way you deserve. Even if they gave birth to you.